Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is molecular compounds, or also known as covalent compounds. So this little picture here of puppies is very cute, but it's also relevant to molecular compounds. And this is because these three puppies here all have the same stick. So they're all sharing the same stick. And molecular bonding in molecular compounds is all about sharing and sharing of electrons. So let's start with a review of our classification of matter. So what exactly then is a compound? So it's a pure substance with two or more elements chemically combined. So we're going to look at today then what it means to be a chemically combined compound or a molecular compound then. So yesterday you looked at ionic bonding, and this is where electrons leave one atom and they're gained by another atom to satisfy both atoms' octets. So that means that they have to each have 8 electrons in their outer shell. And because of this, they form ions. So they get a charge, a positive, depending if they've lost electrons, or a negative if they gained electrons. And these opposite charges mean that our atoms are attracted to one another. Molecular bonding is when electrons are shared by 2 or more atoms to satisfy their octets. So they share electrons to get 8 electrons in their outer shells. When atoms have 8 electrons in their outer shells, they're stable. So that's why this type of bonding goes on, to get this stability. So how can you tell if a bond is ionic or molecular? Well, it's quite easy actually. If a metal is bonded to a non-metal, it's an ionic bond. If they're two non-metals, then it's going to be a molecular bond. So when we're talking today about molecular bonds, we're only talking about non-metals. So let's look then at some example of molecular compounds. So there's lots of different molecular compounds, so let's then first look at gases. So carbon dioxide, water, hydrogen gas, nitrogen gas, oxygen, they are all molecular compounds. Hydrocarbons, so you might not know exactly what a hydrocarbon is, but you will have heard of methane, propane, butane, octane. These are all molecular compounds. Glucose, so sugar, is a molecular compound, and you should have seen this C6H12O6 somewhere else. We have actually seen it before in photosynthesis. So this is another example of a molecular compound. And most biological molecules, so molecules that make us up, so enzymes, proteins, fats, even our DNA is molecular compounds. They are a lot more complicated molecular compounds than we'll be looking at today, but they are molecular compounds nevertheless. So let's start by looking at the properties then of our molecular compounds. So we can also call molecular compounds covalent compounds. So covalent compounds generally have a much lower melting and boiling point than ionic compounds. They are also a lot softer compared to ionic compounds. They are more flammable, and they don't conduct electricity in water. So ionic compounds are able to dissociate or break up into their ions, and this allows them to conduct electricity through water. Covalent compounds aren't able to break up, so that means that they cannot conduct electricity in water. So they can't break up into these charged atoms. so that therefore they can't conduct electricity. So let's get back then to looking at what a molecular compound actually is. So it's a combination of two or more atoms held together by molecular bonds. So like I just mentioned before, another name for a molecular compound is a covalent bond, or a molecular bond is a covalent bond, and a molecular compound can also be called a covalent compound. These are just interchangeable words here, meaning the same thing. So a molecular bond is between two non-metals, or atoms, it doesn't have to be two, atoms that are non-metals. So these will share pairs of electrons, or share electrons to create pairs. Each bond represents a single pair of shared electrons, and they are sharing their electrons so that they can get full outer shells. They want to be stable and happy and have their full shells. So they need 8 electrons in their outer shell. So if we have a look here at this example here, we have this atom sharing one of its electrons with this atom. So they each now have 8 electrons in their outer shell. So they're both happy now. So we can have a look then at what exactly these two atoms are. So we can see that we have 12 protons, 18 neutrons, and 17 electrons. So if you have a look at your periodic table, we know that our proton number is the same as our atomic mass. So you can look for your atomic number. So the protons is the same as the atomic number. So you can have a look then at your atomic number 17 on your periodic table, and we can see then that we have 2 chlorine atoms here. So if we look then at chlorine, we know that chlorine needs to gain 1. So what it does is it shares with itself to create this molecular bond, and we have our molecular compound here then. So let's have a look then at another example. So if we look at water, we have hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen has 1 valence electron, and it only needs 1 more to be full because it's in the first period, so it only has 1 electron shell, and that first electron shell only needs 2 electrons to be full. Then we also have oxygen, and oxygen has 6 valence electrons, and it needs 2 more to be full. So this diagram here, I've only shown the valence electron shell, just for ease of this demonstration. So our hydrogen then would like to share the electron with the oxygen. So if it's sharing, then our hydrogen will have 2, and our oxygen here will have 1 extra electron. However, our oxygen here still needs to fill 1 more electron. So what we do is we add another hydrogen. So we can share our electrons, and what happens is then our hydrogen has 2 electrons in its outer shell, so it's happy. Our other hydrogen has 2 electrons in its outer shell, so it's happy. And our oxygen has gained the 2 electrons that are needed to have 8 electrons in its outer shell, so it is also happy. So I'm going to leave this first video here. Click on the next video and we will talk about